There are moments in life that feel ordinary on the surface but carry something deeper underneath. Moments when you pause for no clear reason. When something inside you whispers, "Pay attention, this matters." And somehow, out of all the noise, all the distractions, all the countless things you could be doing right now, you ended up here, reading this, feeling this pull. That is not random. This is what Archangel Michael calls a divine interruption. Because if you're honest with yourself, something has felt off lately, hasn't it? Not grammatically wrong, not completely broken, but just enough to make you question things. Patterns repeating. Situations that look different on the outside, but somehow feel the same deep inside. The same type of disappointment. The same emotional cycle. The same almost breakthrough that never fully arrives. You've noticed it even if you haven't had the words for it. Maybe it shows up in your relationships, where things begin with promise, only to end in confusion. Maybe it appears in your finances, where progress starts, then suddenly stalls. Maybe it's internal, a cycle of motivation followed by unexplained exhaustion. You push forward and then something invisible seems to pull you back. And the most frustrating part, you've tried to change it. You've tried thinking differently, acting differently, praying differently, walking away, starting over. And yet the pattern finds you again, almost like it knows you, almost like it's been following you. That feeling, that quiet frustration you've carried is exactly why this moment is happening. Because Archangel Michael does not step in randomly. He intervenes when something is about to shift at a level you cannot see yet. And right now, he is making something very clear. The pattern you've been living through is not ending slowly, it is about to break suddenly. But here's the part that might surprise you. It's not breaking because you finally figured everything out. It's not breaking because you became perfect. It's not even breaking because of something you consciously did. It's breaking because the timing has changed. There is a spiritual alignment happening around you right now. Something has reached its limit. Something that was once allowed is no longer permitted to continue. And when that kind of shift happens, it doesn't fade away quietly, it collapses. That's why this message found you now. Not yesterday, not last week, not months ago when you were still trying to force things to work. But now, at the exact moment when the cycle has run its course and the pressure is about to release. Think about the past few days. Have you felt more aware than usual? More reflective? Maybe even more tired, but in a deeper, almost spiritual way. Or maybe there's been a strange sense that something is about to happen, even if you can't explain what. That is not your imagination. That is your spirit recognizing that you are standing at the edge of a shift. Archangel Michael describes this moment like standing before a door that has been locked for years, and suddenly, without warning, you hear the click. Not because you forced it open, but because something on the other side had decided it's time. And here's the truth you need to hear right now. You are not stuck anymore. You are at the breaking point of the pattern itself. But breaking points can feel confusing before they feel freeing. They can look like disruption before they reveal direction. And if you don't understand what's happening, you might mistake the shift for another setback. That is why this message is reaching you before it happens. So you don't panic. So you don't retreat. So you don't accidentally rebuild what heaven is trying to remove. Because what's coming next will not look like anything you've experienced before. It will feel unfamiliar. It will feel unexpected. And for a moment it may even feel uncomfortable. But it will also be the very thing that sets you free from what has followed you for so long. This is your moment of awareness. This is your divine interruption. And this is only the beginning. Type "I am ready for the shift" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010 is now activated around your path. There is something you've lived through more than once, and deep down, you know it. It doesn't always look the same on the surface, which is why it has been so difficult to fully recognize. The faces may change. The circumstances may shift. The timing may vary. But the feeling, the outcome, the emotional residue it leaves behind it has been strangely familiar. And that familiarity is not coincidence. It is a pattern. Archangel Michael reveals that patterns do not begin loudly. They begin subtly, almost invisibly, weaving themselves into your life through small moments that seem harmless at first. A decision here, a reaction there, a situation that feels slightly off, but not enough to alarm you. And before you realize it, those small moments begin to connect, forming a cycle that repeats itself with quiet precision. You move forward, thinking you've left the past behind, only to find yourself standing in a situation that feels like something you've already lived through. You may have asked yourself questions you couldn't quite answer. Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I end up here again? Why do things start well, only to shift in a way I didn't expect? These questions are not signs of confusion. They are signs of awareness trying to break through. Because the truth is, the pattern has been present longer than you think. Sometimes it shows up in the way people enter your life, bringing a sense of excitement or hope, only for that energy to change once you've invested your trust. Sometimes it appears in opportunities that seem aligned at first, but slowly lose momentum without clear explanation. Other times, it exists within you, in the form of thoughts or emotional responses that rise up at the same point in different situations, almost as if they are being triggered by something deeper than the moment itself. What makes this pattern so powerful is not just its repetition, but its ability to disguise itself. It convinces you that each experience is separate, unrelated, a new beginning that simply didn't work out. But Archangel Michael is making something clear now. These are not isolated events. They are connected threads of the same cycle, looping until something interrupts them at the root. And here is where the deeper realization begins to unfold. The pattern was not sustained by external circumstances alone. It was reinforced by something internal that you were never fully shown. Not because you lacked awareness, but because the timing for that awareness had not yet arrived. Your lesson still forming, strength still building, clarity still preparing to emerge. You were not meant to see everything all at once. That is why, even when you tried to break the cycle, it seemed to find its way back. You changed your actions, but the pattern adapted. You shifted your environment, but the energy followed. You distanced yourself from certain situations, yet similar ones appeared in different forms. It felt as though you were moving forward, yet somehow circling back. This is what Archangel Michael calls a concealed loop, a repetition that continues not because you are failing, but because the deeper structure behind it has not yet been dismantled. And that structure is not something you could have forced your way out of. It required a moment like this, a moment of revelation where the pattern is no longer hidden beneath surface changes, but exposed for what it truly is. Now, as you reflect, you may begin to see it more clearly. The similarities between moments you once thought were unrelated. The emotional echoes that carried from one situation to another. The way certain outcomes repeated themselves, even when everything else seemed different. This clarity is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to free you from the illusion that it was random. Because it was never random. It was a cycle waiting for its appointed moment to break. And that moment is approaching now. Archangel Michael is not showing you this to make you dwell on the past. but to prepare you for what is about to happen next. Because once a pattern is seen clearly, it loses its power to continue unnoticed. And once its structure is exposed, it cannot rebuild itself in the same way again. You are no longer walking through this unconsciously. You are no longer repeating without awareness. You are standing at the edge of understanding, where the pattern that once controlled the rhythm of your life is about to be disrupted in a way you did not expect. The repetition is ending. The cycle is weakening. And what once felt inevitable is now becoming optional. This is the moment where everything begins to change, not because the pattern has disappeared yet, but because you have finally seen it for what it is. And once you see it, you cannot return to the same unconscious participation that allowed it to continue. Something deeper is shifting now. Something irreversible. And the pattern that once followed you is about to lose its hold completely. Type I see the pattern clearly in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 2020 is now activating clarity in your life. There's a question that has quietly followed you through every repetition, even if you never fully voiced it out loud. Why did this keep happening? Why did something that caused discomfort, confusion, or delay continue to reappear, even when you were trying to move forward? And deeper than that, why did it feel like no matter what you changed on the outside, something unseen kept recreating the same outcome? Archangel Michael steps forward in this moment with clarity that cuts through every assumption you may have carried. The pattern did not continue because you were unaware. It did not continue because you were weak. It did not continue because you were doing something wrong. It continued because there was a deeper root that had not yet been revealed to you, a root that was spiritual in nature and precise in its timing. You see, not everything that repeats in your life is meant to harm you. Some things repeat because they are refining you. Some cycles are not punishments, but preparations. And this is where the truth becomes both challenging and freeing at the same time. The pattern you experienced was not simply an obstacle placed in your path. It was a process that was shaping your awareness, your discernment, and your strength in ways that could not have developed any other way. There were layers to this pattern, layers that were not visible at the surface level. Each repetition carried a lesson, but not the kind of lesson that reveals itself immediately. It was the kind that builds slowly, almost quietly, within you. Each time you faced the cycle, something in you shifted, even if you did not recognize it at the time. Your tolerance changed. Your perception deepened. Your ability to sense what was aligned and what was not began to sharpen. But here is what you were not shown until now. The root of the pattern was not just external circumstances or recurring situations. It was tied to a deeper alignment within your life, something that had to reach a certain level of readiness before it could be broken. Archangel Michael reveals that there are moments in life where a cycle is allowed to continue, not because it cannot end, but because its ending requires a specific level of internal clarity that had not yet fully formed. This is why, even when you tried to break away, the pattern seemed to return. You were not being pulled back into it. You were being positioned to see it more clearly. Each return brought you closer to understanding something you had not yet fully grasped. Each repetition removed another layer of illusion, another layer of misunderstanding, another layer of misplaced trust or misaligned energy. There were moments when you felt frustrated, moments when you questioned why things were not changing, moments when you wondered if you were somehow stuck. But what you could not see then is what is being revealed now. You were not stuck. You were being prepared for a moment where the pattern would not just end temporarily, but break completely at its root. And that root could only be exposed once you reached a certain level of awareness. Not surface awareness, but deep recognition. The kind where you no longer see the pattern as something happening to you, but something you now understand from within. The kind where you can feel the difference between what is aligned with you and what is not without needing external confirmation. This is why the timing matters so much. Because if the pattern had broken earlier, before this level of clarity was formed, there was a possibility it could have returned in a different form. It could have reappeared through new situations, new people, new circumstances that carried the same underlying structure. But now, something has shifted within you that prevents that from happening again in the same way. Archangel Michael makes it clear that this moment is not just about the end of a cycle. It is about the dismantling of the foundation that allowed the cycle to exist in the first place. And once that foundation is removed, the pattern no longer has anything to attach itself to. This is why you may have felt an internal shift recently, something subtle but undeniable. A change in how you respond, a change in what you tolerate, a change in what you feel drawn to, and what you feel disconnected from. These are not random emotional fluctuations. These are signs that the root is loosening, that the structure behind the pattern is beginning to collapse. You are not the same person who first encountered this cycle. You do not carry the same perspective. You do not hold the same level of attachment to what once kept the pattern alive. And because of that, the pattern no longer has the same power it once did. This is the deeper reason it was allowed to continue until now. Not to keep you in it, but to bring you to a point where you would outgrow it completely. And now that you have reached that point, the breaking of the pattern is no longer a possibility. It is a certainty. Something has completed its purpose. Something has reached its end. And what is about to happen next will not just change the pattern. It will remove it entirely. Type "I release the root" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 3030 is now activating transformation within you. As this revelation settles into your spirit, understand this: every time truth like this reaches you, it is not just for you alone. It is meant to ripple outward, to reach others who are still trapped in cycles they cannot yet see. When you choose to support this message through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are not simply giving. You are sowing into a harvest of awakening. The word declares that what you plant in faith returns multiplied, and right now, your seed becomes light in someone else's darkness. If you feel the pull in your spirit, let it become action. This is your moment to participate in something greater than yourself, to become a vessel through which clarity flows to others. As you give, heaven records not the amount, but the obedience behind it, and releases favor in return. Step into this alignment now. Activate your giving and watch what opens over your life. There comes a moment in every cycle when everything that once felt stable begins to feel unstable. Not chaotic, not completely out of control, but just enough to make you pause and realize that something is no longer holding together the way it used to. This is the moment Archangel Michael is revealing to you now. The moment where the pattern you have lived through is not gradually fading away, but preparing to break in a way that feels sudden, unexpected, and unmistakably real. You may have already begun to sense the early signs of this shift. A disruption in what once felt predictable, and change in how certain situations respond to you. Conversations that do not unfold the way they normally would. Decisions that feel different, even when the circumstances appear the same. It is subtle at first, almost easy to overlook, but it carries a deeper meaning. The pattern is no longer able to maintain its structure around you. Archangel Michael describes this moment as a breaking point, but not the kind that leads to collapse within you. It is a breaking point within the pattern itself. Something that once operated smoothly, almost automatically, is now encountering resistance. not from the outside, but from within your alignment. The energy that once sustained the cycle no longer matches who you are becoming, and because of that, the pattern begins to fracture. This is why the shift will feel unexpected. You may not be consciously trying to end the pattern at the moment it breaks. In fact, it may occur in a situation that looks familiar, something that resembles previous experiences. But this time, something will not connect the same way. Something will not continue the way it always has. The sequence will interrupt itself, and in that interruption, the entire cycle will begin to collapse. There is often a moment of confusion when this happens. A brief pause where you recognize that something is different, but you cannot immediately explain why. You may question whether this is another variation of the same pattern or something entirely new. This is where awareness becomes essential. Because what feels unfamiliar in that moment is not uncertainty. It is freedom beginning to take form. The pattern has relied on repetition, on predictability, on your unconscious participation in its rhythm. But now, that rhythm is being disrupted. And once disrupted, it cannot return to its original form. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this is not a temporary break. This is not a pause before the cycle resumes. This is the point where the structure itself loses its ability to continue. What makes this moment powerful is not just the breaking, but the way it unfolds. It will not require force. It will not demand struggle. It will not come from exhaustion or frustration. It will come from a shift in alignment that has already taken place within you. A shift that has quietly been building, preparing, strengthening beneath the surface until it reached this exact point. You may notice that what once triggered you no longer has the same effect. What once drew you in now feels distant. What once seemed necessary now feels optional. These are not small changes. They are signs that the pattern no longer has a place to anchor itself in your life. And without that anchor, it begins to dissolve. There may also be a moment where the pattern attempts one final repetition, a familiar situation presenting itself in a way that looks almost identical to before. But this is not a return. This is a test of alignment. And this time, your response will be different, not because you are trying to change it, but because you have already changed. Archangel Michael makes it clear that this is the moment where many people misunderstand what is happening. They see the familiar situation and assume the cycle is repeating. But what they do not realize is that the pattern is not repeating. It is revealing its final form before it disappears. And when it breaks, it will not leave behind confusion. It will leave behind clarity. You will see exactly what was holding the cycle in place. You will understand why it continued for as long as it did. And most importantly, you will recognize that it no longer has any power over you. This is the shift that has been building. This is the moment that has been preparing itself behind every repetition you have experienced. And this is why Archangel Michael has brought this message to you now, so that when it happens, you do not question it. So that when the pattern breaks, you do not try to rebuild it out of familiarity. So that when the shift unfolds, you allow it to complete what it was always meant to do. Because once this moment arrives, there is no returning to what was, only a movement forward into what is now opening for you. Type "I allow the break" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 4040 is now activating alignment in your life. There is a critical moment that follows every breaking point, and this is where many people unknowingly lose what was just set free. Archangel Michael steps forward now, not with fear, but with firm clarity, because what is about to happen in your life requires more than awareness. It requires alertness. The pattern may be breaking, the cycle may be collapsing, but the transition between what was and what is coming next is where your attention becomes essential. You must understand this deeply. When a pattern ends, it does not simply disappear without leaving behind echoes. There is a brief window where the old energy attempts to reassert itself, not because it still has power, but because it recognizes it is losing its place in your life. This is not something to fear, but it is something to recognize. Because if you mistake this moment, you may respond in a way that reconnects you to what was already being removed. Archangel Michael calls this the moment of spiritual alertness. You may notice that as the pattern begins to break, certain situations intensify slightly before they disappear. A conversation may feel more charged than usual. A familiar reaction may try to rise within you one last time. A situation that resembles the old cycle may appear suddenly, almost as if testing whether you are still available for it. This is not the pattern returning. This is the pattern releasing its final attempt to remain relevant. And this is where your awareness must remain steady, because what you choose in this moment matters, not in a way that creates pressure, but in a way that confirms your alignment. If you react the way you once did, the pattern will try to reattach. But if you respond from the clarity you now carry, it will dissolve completely. This is not about perfection. It is about presence. It is about recognizing that you are no longer the same person who once participated in that cycle. Archangel Michael is not warning you because something negative is coming. He is preparing you because something significant is shifting, and that shift requires your cooperation at the level of awareness. You are not being asked to fight anything. You are being asked to see clearly. There is a difference. When you fight, you engage with the pattern. When you see clearly, you move beyond it. This is why spiritual alertness is so important right now. It is not about being on edge or expecting something to go wrong. It is about being grounded enough to recognize when something no longer belongs in your life, even if it tries to appear familiar or comfortable. Because familiarity can be deceptive. It can make something feel safe simply because it is known, even when it no longer aligns with who you are becoming. You may feel a pull to respond in old ways, not because you want to, but because it is what you have done before. That pull is not your truth. It is the residue of the pattern, trying to complete a cycle that is already ending. And in this moment, your awareness becomes your strength. Archangel Michael makes it clear that you do not need to overthink this process. You do not need to analyze every detail or anticipate every possible outcome. You simply need to remain present enough to recognize the difference between what feels aligned and what feels like a repetition. A distinction will become clearer than it has ever been before. You will begin to notice that your reactions are changing without effort, that your responses are coming from a place of calm rather than urgency, that situations which once required energy from you no longer hold your attention in the same way. These are not small changes. These are confirmations that you are moving out of the pattern and into a new alignment. There is also something else you must be aware of. As the pattern breaks, space will open in your life, and that space may feel unfamiliar at first. You may be tempted to fill it quickly, to replace what has ended with something that feels similar, simply because it is known. But this is where patience becomes part of your alertness. Not every empty space needs to be filled immediately. Some spaces are meant to remain open long enough for something entirely new to enter, something that does not carry the structure of the old pattern. If you rush to fill it, you may unintentionally recreate what was just removed. But if you allow it to remain open, you create the possibility for something different to take its place. Archangel Michael's warning is not about danger. It is about awareness during transition. It is about understanding that the breaking of the pattern is only one part of the shift. The other part is how you move in the space that follows. This is your moment to remain steady. This is your moment to trust the clarity that is already forming within you. This is your moment to recognize that you are no longer bound to what once repeated in your life. The pattern is breaking. The cycle is ending. And your awareness now ensures that it does not rebuild itself again. Type "I remain aware" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 5050 is now strengthening your clarity and protection. There is a reason why, just as things begin to shift, you may feel a sudden increase in pressure, a tension that seems to rise without clear explanation, a sense that something is pushing against you, even as you are moving forward. This is the part that often confuses people the most, because it feels like things are becoming harder right at the moment they are supposed to be breaking open. But Archangel Michael reveals that this resistance is not a sign that the pattern is strengthening. It is a sign that it is losing its soul. You must understand this clearly. When something has been operating in your life for a long time, it builds a kind of momentum, a rhythm that continues because it has always continued. And when that rhythm is interrupted, when something within you no longer supports it, there is a temporary intensification as that old momentum begins to collapse. It is not growing stronger. It is reacting to its own ending. This is why you may feel a sudden urge to question yourself. Thoughts may arise that sound familiar, almost like echoes from previous moments when the pattern was still active. Doubt may try to reintroduce itself. Old emotions may surface briefly, even if you believed you had already moved past them. This is not regression. This is release. Archangel Michael calls this the surface reaction of a dissolving pattern. What has been buried beneath repetition is being brought upward, not to overwhelm you, but to leave you. And when something leaves, it does not always do so quietly. It moves. It shifts. It reveals itself one final time before it disappears. This is why the resistance feels more noticeable now than it did before. Because now you are aware of it. Now, you can see it for what it is. You may also notice that certain external situations begin to mirror this internal resistance. People may behave in ways that feel slightly out of alignment with how they usually interact with you. Circumstances may feel temporarily unstable. Plans may shift unexpectedly. These are not random disruptions. They are reflections of the deeper shift taking place within your alignment. When your internal state changes, your external environment responds. And as the pattern loses its place within you, it also begins to lose its structure around you. This can create a brief period where things feel unsettled, not because they are falling apart, but because they are reorganizing. The old alignment is dissolving, and the new alignment has not yet fully taken form. This is where many people misunderstand the process. They interpret this temporary resistance as a sign that something is wrong. They assume that the increase in tension means they are moving in the wrong direction. But Archangel Michael makes it clear that the opposite is true. The resistance is not blocking your progress. It is confirming it. If the pattern were still stable, you would not feel this shift. If the cycle were still intact, things would continue as they always have. The very fact that you are experiencing this intensity now is evidence that something has already changed. Something has already broken beneath the surface, and what you are feeling is the after effect of that break. There is also an important truth you must hold on to during this moment. You are not meant to fight this resistance. You are not meant to push against it or try to force it away. Resistance loses its power when it is not engaged. When it is observed without reaction, it begins to dissolve on its own. This is where your awareness becomes your stability. Instead of reacting to the tension, You remain present within it. Instead of trying to fix what feels unsettled, you allow it to unfold. Because what is happening now is not something that needs to be controlled. It is something that is completing itself. You may feel moments where you are tempted to return to what is familiar, simply to escape the discomfort of this transition. That temptation is not a sign of weakness. It is a natural response to change. But this is where you must remember what you now understand. The familiar is what kept the pattern alive. Returning to it would only delay what is already in motion. Archangel Michael reminds you that this phase is temporary. It is not the new state of your life. It is the transition between what was and what is coming next. And within this transition, your role is not to struggle, but to remain steady. There is a quiet strength forming within you now, one that does not rely on force or effort. It is the strength of clarity, the strength of knowing that what you are feeling is not the continuation of the pattern, but the final release of it. The resistance will pass, the tension will settle, and what remains after it does will not resemble what came before. This is the turning point. This is the moment where the old loses its grip completely. And even if it feels intense right now, you are not moving backward. You are moving through the final layer before everything changes. Type "I move through the resistance" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 6060 is now stabilizing your path. There is something you must understand now. Something Archangel Michael brings forward with unmistakable clarity. This pattern did not just happen around you. It did not randomly select you. It did not continue in your life without purpose. There is a reason it intersected with your path, and more importantly, there is a reason it is ending through you. You were not just experiencing the pattern. You were positioned within it. There is a difference. Because many people encounter cycles, but not everyone is placed in a position to break them. Some move through repetition without ever questioning it. Some adapt to it, normalize it, even build their lives around it. But you noticed it. You questioned it. You felt the discomfort of it in a way that would not allow you to settle. And that discomfort was not weakness. It was awareness trying to activate within you. Archangel Michael reveals that the very sensitivity you have carried, the way you feel things deeply, the way you sense when something is not aligned even when everything looks fine on the surface, is not accidental. It is the very thing that made you capable of reaching this moment. Because to break a pattern, you must first feel that it is not meant to continue. And you felt it. Even when you could not explain it, even when others did not understand it, even when it would have been easier to ignore it, you felt that something was not right. That feeling guided you, even when you doubted it. That awareness kept you from fully settling into what was repeating. And now, it has brought you to the point where the cycle can no longer continue through you. This is what Archangel Michael means when he says you were chosen for this moment. Not chosen in a way that isolates you from others, but chosen in the sense that your alignment, your awareness, and your readiness have reached a point where the pattern cannot move forward through your life anymore. You have become the interruption within the cycle. And once a pattern meets interruption at the level of awareness, it cannot sustain itself. You may not have realized it, but every time you questioned the repetition, every time you paused before reacting the same way, every time you felt that internal resistance to what was familiar, you were weakening the pattern. You were creating small breaks in its structure. And those small breaks have now reached a point where the entire cycle is ready to collapse. This is why your role matters so much right now. Because the pattern is not just ending around you. It is ending because of the shift within you. And that shift cannot be reversed. You cannot unknow what you now understand. You cannot return to the same level of unconscious participation that allowed the pattern to continue before. There is also something deeper tied to this moment. When a pattern breaks through someone who has become aware of it, it does not just end for that individual. It changes the trajectory of everything connected to it. The repetition that once moved through your life loses its path forward. The cycle that once repeated itself through your experiences no longer has a place to continue. This is why Archangel Michael emphasizes that your role is not small. You are not just stepping out of something. You are stopping something. And that distinction matters. Because when you understand that you are not just leaving a pattern, but breaking it, you begin to see your experience differently. You begin to recognize that what you went through was not meaningless. It was part of a process that led to this exact moment of transformation. There may have been times when you felt like you were going in circles, like you were not making progress, like you were encountering the same challenges without resolution. But what you could not see then is what is becoming clear now. You were not circling. You were converting, moving closer and closer to a point where the pattern could no longer continue. And that point is here. Now, this is also why the shift may feel unfamiliar. Because when a pattern ends, it creates a space where something new can emerge. But before that newness fully forms, there is a period where you are no longer operating within the old, yet not fully anchored in the new. The space can feel uncertain, but it is not instability. It is transition. And within that transition, your role remains the same. Not to force what comes next, not to control the outcome, but to remain aligned with the clarity that has brought you here. Archangel Michael reminds you that you do not need to prove anything in this moment. You do not need to validate your awareness or justify your shift. The breaking of the pattern itself is the confirmation. You will begin to see it in ways that cannot be denied. Situations that once repeated will no longer return in the same form. Reactions that once felt automatic will no longer arise the same way. The cycle that once felt inevitable will no longer have a place in your life. And when that becomes clear, you will understand something that has been building beneath the surface all along. You were never meant to stay within the pattern. You were meant to end it. Type "I am the break in the pattern" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7070 is now activating your transformation. There is always a moment that seems small on the surface, almost insignificant, yet carries the full weight of transformation behind it. Archangel Michael reveals that the breaking of this pattern will not come through something dramatic or obvious at first. It will not arrive with warning signs that make it easy to prepare. Instead, it will be triggered by something simple, something that in another time might have passed unnoticed, but now will carry a completely different impact. This is what makes it unexpected. You may be moving through an ordinary day, engaging in a conversation that feels familiar, facing a situation that resembles something you have encountered before. And then, in that moment, something shifts. Not around you at first, but within you. A realization, a pause, a response that feels different from anything you have given before. And in that response, the entire pattern loses its ability to continue. It will not feel forced. It will not feel rehearsed. It will feel natural, almost effortless, as if something inside you has quietly decided that the cycle is no longer valid. This is the trigger. Archangel Michael explains that patterns rely on predictability. They depend on you responding in ways that keep the sequence intact. The same reactions, the same emotional engagement, the same level of involvement. But the moment you respond differently, not by effort but by alignment, the pattern has nothing to attach itself to. That is why this trigger is so powerful. because it does not come from trying to break the pattern. It comes from no longer being connected to it. You may notice that when this moment happens, time feels slightly different, as if everything slows down for just a second. You become aware of your choice in a way you were not before. And instead of following the familiar path, you choose something else. Not out of resistance and not out of defiance, but out of verity. And in that clarity, the cycle ends. There is also something important you must understand about this trigger. It will not announce itself as significant. It may feel like a small decision, a subtle shift in how you respond or what you choose to engage with. But its impact will be far greater than it appears. Because this is not about the moment itself. It is about what the moment represents. It represents the point where you no longer participate in what once repeated. Archangel Michael emphasizes that you do not need to look for this trigger or try to create it. It will happen naturally, at the exact moment when your alignment meets the situation that once sustained the pattern. And when it happens, you will recognize it, not because it is dramatic, but because it feels final. There will be a sense that something has closed. Something that once felt open and unresolved will no longer carry the same energy. You may even find yourself reflecting on the moment afterward, realizing that you responded in a way that felt completely different from before. And in that reflection, you will begin to understand that the pattern did not just change. It ended. This is also why the breaking of the pattern may not be immediately obvious to others. From the outside, the situation may look similar. The same people, the same environment, the same circumstances. But what has changed is your internal alignment, and that change is what determines the outcome. What once continued will now stop. What once repeated will now dissolve. What once felt inevitable will now feel distant. And it will all trace back to that one moment. That one unexpected trigger where everything shifted. Archangel Michael reminds you that this is not something to second-guess when it happens. You may be tempted to analyze it, to question whether the pattern is truly over or if it will return in another form. But the clarity you feel in that moment is your confirmation. Because when a pattern truly breaks, it does not leave behind uncertainty. It leaves behind stillness. A sense that something has completed itself. A sense that you are no longer connected to what once held you in place. And from that stillness, something new begins to form. Not a repetition of what was, but a completely different direction that was not available to you before. This is the power of the unexpected trigger. It does not just interrupt the cycle. It ends it. And once it ends, the path in front of you is no longer shaped by the past, but by the clarity you now carry. Type "I embrace the shift" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8080 is now activating new alignment in your life. And as this shift begins to unfold within you, understand this. What you are receiving right now is not meant to stop with you. Just as a single seed creates a harvest far beyond itself, every act of support you release becomes a channel through which this message reaches another soul still trapped in their own cycle. The word speaks of light shining in darkness, and through your giving, you become part of that light. I feel led to say this clearly. I choose to sow into what is setting people free. When you act on that prompting through Super Thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are not making a donation. You are participating in divine alignment. Heaven records the obedience behind your action, and in return, releases provision, clarity, and breakthrough into your life. Do not delay this moment. Step into it now and let your seed become part of someone else's transformation. There is something that happens after a pattern breaks that cannot be understood until it is felt. Archangel Michael brings your attention to this part now, because while the breaking itself is powerful, what follows it is just as significant. It is not just a shift in circumstances. It is a shift within you, an emotional release that may arrive in ways you do not expect. You might think that when something ends, especially something that has been difficult or repetitive, the immediate feeling would be relief. And while relief will come, it may not be the first emotion you experience. Instead, there may be a moment where everything feels unusually quiet. Not empty in a negative sense, but still, as if something that once occupied space within you has suddenly disappeared, leaving behind an unfamiliar calm. This calm can feel surprising at first, because when you have lived within a pattern for a long time, even if it was not aligned with you, it still created a kind of emotional rhythm, a familiarity in how you process situations, how you reacted, how you anticipated outcomes. And when that rhythm is gone, there is a brief period where your emotional state begins to recalibrate. Archangel Michael describes this as the release of stored energy. Every repetition of the pattern carried emotion with it. Frustration, anticipation, hope, disappointment, effort. These emotions did not simply disappear after each cycle. They accumulated, forming a layer within you that you may not have been fully aware of. And when the pattern breaks, that entire layer begins to release. This is why you may feel a wave of emotion that does not seem directly connected to the moment itself. You may feel a sudden sense of relief that is deeper than expected, or you may feel a quiet sadness, not because you want the pattern back, but because you are recognizing how much energy was tied to it. You may even feel a sense of lightness, as if something has been lifted from you that you did not realize you were carrying. All of these responses are part of the release. None of them mean that something is wrong. They mean that something has completed. There is also a deeper aspect to this emotional shift. When a pattern ends, it creates a space not only in your external life, but within your internal experience. And that space allows you to feel differently. Without the repetition guiding your emotional responses, you begin to experience moments without the weight of expectation or the memory of how things usually unfold. This can feel unfamiliar at first. You may notice that you are not reacting as quickly, that you are not anticipating the same outcomes, that you are not carrying the same emotional intensity into situations that once felt significant. This is not detachment in a negative sense. It is clarity. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this clarity is one of the most important parts of the shift, because it allows you to experience your life without the influence of the old pattern. It allows you to respond from the present moment, rather than from the memory of repetition. You may also find that your perspective begins to change. Moments that once felt confusing may now seem clear. Situations that once felt unresolved may no longer carry the same weight. You may look back at the pattern and understand it in a way that was not possible before. Not with frustration, but with recognition. You will see how it formed, how it continued, and why it ended when it did. And in that understanding, there is a sense of closure. Not forced, not created, but natural. It is the kind of closure that does not require explanation from anyone else. It does not depend on external confirmation. It comes from within, from the realization that the cycle has completed its course and no longer has a place in your life. There may also be moments where you feel a renewed sense of energy, as if something that was once being used to sustain the pattern is now available to you again. This energy may show up as motivation, as clarity in your decisions, or as a quiet confidence that was not present before. This is not a sudden change in who you are. It is a return to a state that was always there beneath the pattern. Archangel Michael reminds you that this release is not something to rush or control. It is something to allow. Each emotion that rises is part of the process completing itself. Each moment of stillness is part of the new alignment forming within you. You do not need to question it. You do not need to analyze it. You simply need to experience it as it unfolds. Because what you are feeling now is not just the end of something. It is the beginning of a new way of being. A way that is no longer shaped by repetition, but by clarity. And as this emotional release settles, you will begin to recognize something that may not have been clear before. You are no longer carrying what once defined your experience. You are moving forward without the weight of the pattern. And that changes everything. Type "I feel the release" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9090 is now activating peace within you. There is a quiet but powerful transformation that begins to take shape once the pattern has fully released its hold. Archangel Michael now draws your attention, not to what is ending, but to what is emerging in its place. Because the breaking of a pattern is never the final step. It is the opening of a new alignment, one that was not accessible to you while the cycle was still active. At first, this new alignment may not feel dramatic. It may not arrive with sudden, overwhelming change. Instead, it begins subtly, through the way you move, the way you think, and the way you respond to the world around you. The difference is not always in what is happening externally, but in how you experience it internally. You will begin to notice that situations no longer carry the same weight they once did. What used to feel urgent may now feel manageable. What once demanded your emotional energy may now pass without pulling you in. This is not indifference. It is balance. It is the result of no longer being connected to a pattern that once shaped your responses. Archangel Michael explains that this new alignment is built on clarity. Not the kind of clarity that comes from analyzing every situation, but the kind that arises naturally when you are no longer influenced by repetition. You begin to see things as they are, without the overlay of past experiences guiding your perception. This clarity changes your decisions. You may find that you choose differently without needing to think as much about it. That you are drawn toward different opportunities, different environments, even different types of interactions. This is not something you are forcing. It is something that is unfolding as a natural extension of who you have become. There is also a sense of stability that begins to form. Not a rigid stability, but a groundedness. A feeling that you are no longer being pulled in multiple directions by conflicting patterns. You may notice that your energy feels more consistent, that your focus is clear, that you are able to move forward without the same interruptions that once slowed your progress. This is the result of alignment. When the pattern was active, part of your energy was always being redirected, whether you realized it or not. It was tied to maintaining, reacting to, or recovering from the cycle. Now that the pattern has ended, that energy becomes available to you again. And you will feel it may show up as motivation where there was once hesitation, as confidence where there was once uncertainty, as a quiet sense of direction where there was once confusion. These are not sudden changes imposed from the outside. They are the natural state that emerges when the interference of the pattern is removed. Archangel Michael also reveals that this new alignment will begin to influence what enters your life. Not in a way that feels forced or controlled, but in a way that reflects your internal shift. The situations, opportunities, and interactions that come toward you will begin to match the clarity you now carry. This does not mean everything will be perfect or without challenge. It means that what you encounter will no longer mirror the old pattern. There is a difference between challenge and repetition. Challenges help you grow. Repetition keeps you in place. And what is forming now is an environment where growth can happen without the weight of the past cycle pulling you back. You may also notice that certain things naturally fall away. Not because you are actively removing them, but because they no longer fit within your alignment. Conversations may change. Priorities may shift. What once felt necessary may now feel optional. This is not loss. It is refinement. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this phase requires trust, because the new alignment will not always look familiar. It will not always follow the same patterns you have known, and that unfamiliarity can sometimes feel uncertain, even when it is positive. But what you are stepping into is not meant to resemble what you have left behind. It is meant to be different. This is where you begin to understand the full meaning of the shift. The pattern did not just end so that you could return to the same way of living without it. It ended so that you could move into a completely new way of experiencing your life. A way that is not shaped by repetition, but by presence. A way that is not guided by past outcomes, but by current clarity. A way that allows you to move forward without carrying what once held you in place. And as this alignment continues to unfold, you will begin to recognize something that may not have been clear before. You are not rebuilding your life after the pattern. You are continuing it from a point of clarity that did not exist until now. This is not a restart. This is a progression, and everything that comes next will be shaped by the fact that the pattern is no longer there. Type "I step into NEW alignment" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010X is now activating forward movement in your life. There is always a moment, just before something fully completes, where everything seems to pause. Not in a way that stops the process, but in a way that creates a space for confirmation. Archangel Michael reveals that this is what many call the final test, not because you are being judged, but because you are being given the opportunity to stand fully in the alignment you have now reached. This test does not arrive as something unfamiliar. In fact, it often appears in a form that feels very similar to what you have already experienced. A situation that resembles the old pattern. A conversation that carries the same tone. An opportunity that looks almost identical to something you have encountered before. And for a brief moment, it may feel as though the cycle is attempting to return. But this is not the pattern coming back. This is the pattern revealing whether it still has a place in your life. Archangel Michael makes it clear that this moment is not about difficulty. It is about clarity in action. Everything you have come to understand, everything you have become aware of, everything that has shifted within you, will naturally guide your response. And that response will determine whether the pattern fully dissolves or attempts to linger in a weakened form. You may feel a sense of familiarity when this moment arrives. A recognition that you have been here before. But alongside that familiarity, there will be something different. A quiet awareness that you are no longer the same. That you are not approaching this situation from the same place as before. That something within you has already moved beyond it. This is where many people hesitate. They see the familiar shape of the situation and assume that nothing has changed. They begin to question whether the pattern has truly ended. They may even consider responding in the same way they once did, simply because it is known, because it feels easier than navigating something new. But Archangel Michael urges you to remain steady in this moment, because what you are being shown is not a repetition. It is a reflection, a final reflection of what once was, appearing just long enough for you to see it clearly, without being drawn back into it. The difference now is that you have a choice that you did not fully recognize before. Not because the choice did not exist, but because the awareness needed to see it was not yet fully formed. Now it is. You may notice that your response feels different even before you act on it. That you are able to observe the situation without immediately reacting. That you can see the pattern as it is, without feeling the need to engage with it in the same way. This is not detachment. This is mastery of awareness. Archangel Michael explains that this final test is not meant to challenge you beyond your capacity. It is meant to confirm what has already shifted within you. The strength you need to move through it is not something you must create in the moment. It is something that has been building throughout everything you have experienced up to now. You have already done the work. You have already reached the awareness. This moment simply allows you to stand in it. There is also something important you must recognize. The test is not about making the perfect decision. It is about making an aligned one. You may not have all the answers in that moment. You may not fully understand every aspect of the situation, but you will know, at a deeper level, what feels true to you and what does not. That knowing is enough. When you act from that place, the pattern cannot continue. It has no foundation. It has no connection. It has no way to rebuild itself. And this is where the breakthrough completes. Not in a dramatic or overwhelming way, but in a quiet certainty that something has ended, that the cycle no longer holds you, that the repetition has lost its path forward. You may look back at the moment afterward and realize how simple it was, how different your response felt, how the situation that once would have continued now stopped, almost effortlessly. This is how you will know, not through struggle but through ease, not through force but through clarity. Archangel Michael reminds you that this is not a moment to doubt yourself. It is a moment to trust what you have become. The awareness you carry now is not temporary. It is the result of everything you have moved through, and it is enough to carry you beyond this point. The final test is not here to stop you. It is here to show you that nothing can, because the pattern has already lost its place in your life, and once you move through this moment, it will not return. Type "I passed the final test" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1111X is now sealing your breakthrough. There comes a moment after everything has shifted, after the pattern has broken, after the final test has passed, where something settles so deeply within you that it cannot be questioned. Archangel Michael calls this the moment of divine confirmation. Not a loud announcement, not an external sign that demands your attention, but an internal knowing so clear, so steady, that it leaves no room for doubt. This is how you will know it has truly ended. It will not be because everything around you suddenly becomes perfect. It will not be because every situation resolves itself instantly. It will be because the connection you once had to the pattern is no longer there. The emotional pull is gone. The anticipation of repetition is gone. The sense that you are about to relive something familiar is gone. And in its place, there is stillness. A stillness that does not feel empty but complete. You may find yourself in situations that once would have triggered the pattern, and instead of reacting, you simply observe. Not with effort, not with restraint, but naturally. The absence of reaction becomes your confirmation. The lack of emotional charge becomes your evidence. What once felt heavy now feels neutral. What once felt consuming now feels distant. This is not suppression. This is freedom. Archangel Michael reveals that divine confirmation is not something that needs to be proven to anyone else. It does not require validation from the outside world. It is something you feel within yourself, in a way that cannot be undone. You will not need to question whether the pattern is gone, because you will no longer feel its presence. There is also a shift in how you view the past. You may look back at everything you went through, everything that repeated, everything that once felt unresolved, and instead of feeling frustration or confusion, you feel understanding. Not forced understanding, but natural clarity. You see the purpose. You see the progression. You see how every part of it led to this moment. And in that realization, there is peace. A peace that does not depend on circumstances. A peace that does not require explanation. A peace that comes from knowing that something has completed its course. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this confirmation will not come from a single event. It will unfold through your experience, through the way you move, through the way you think, through the way you respond to what once held power over you. And with each passing moment, that knowing will strengthen. You may also notice that your attention begins to shift forward naturally, not because you are trying to leave the past behind, but because there is nothing left there that holds you. Your focus moves toward what is ahead, toward what is forming, toward what is now possible because the pattern is no longer in place. This is where the true transformation becomes visible, not in what has ended but in what begins. You will start to see opportunities that you may not have recognized before. You will feel drawn toward directions that once felt unclear. You will experience a sense of movement that is no longer interrupted by repetition. And in that movement, you will recognize that your life is no longer shaped by what used to hold it in place. It is shaped by what you now allow into it. This is the confirmation. Not just that the pattern has ended, but that you have moved beyond it. Archangel Michael reminds you that this moment is not the conclusion of your journey. It is the beginning of a new phase, one that is no longer defined by cycles that repeat, but by clarity that evolves. What you step into now will not resemble what you have left behind, because you are no longer the same, and the path ahead reflects that. There is one final truth you must hold on to as this message completes. The pattern did not break by accident. It broke because you were ready. And now that it has ended, there is nothing left to return to. Only something new to move toward. Type IT is done in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212X is now sealing your new beginning. As this message comes to its completion, understand this sacred truth. What has just been revealed to you is not only your breakthrough, it is a key meant to unlock others still trapped in cycles they cannot yet see. Every seed you release into this mission becomes a river of light flowing into someone else's darkness. The Lord declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," not as a distant promise, but as a living command over your life right now. I feel the call rising within you. I will sow where freedom is being released. When you act on that through super thanks, with a PayPal link in the description and QR code on your screen, you are stepping into a prophetic moment of obedience. Your giving is not a donation. It is a declaration that you stand with truth, that you partner with heaven's work, that you refuse to let this light stop with you. And as you release your seed, heaven releases increase, clarity, and divine favor back into your life. Do not wait. Move now. Activate your giving and become part of the breakthrough that continues beyond this moment.